The rain hadn't let up for 3 straight days, and the back road to Willow Creek was more mud than gravel. Martha Gray knew the turns like the lines on her palms. She leaned into the wheel of her old pickup, squinting past the smeared windshield as wipers cleared one slow arc after another. Her boots were caked in dried clay from feeding the goats that morning, her flannel sleeves damp from the fog that hung over the fields like an unspoken warning. She didn't trust the road today. Too soft. Too quiet. Her truck grumbled over each rut and rise, its suspension groaning in protest. She kept it steady, not fast, not slow. Just steady. The way her father taught her. Then a burst of motion. From around the curve, 3 black SUVs appeared like a thunderclap, their glossy frames slicing through the mist. They weren't slowing. Martha's foot eased off the gas. She pulled just slightly right, her tires kissing the edge of the ditch. It wasn't enough. The first SUV surged closer, horn blaring like a challenge. Its headlights flashed, and a second later the roar of the engine filled the cab of her truck. The gravel sprayed up, pattering against her windows. One of the rear doors flew open before the vehicle even stopped moving. A man in a black jacket jumped out, shoes too clean, jaw too tight. He didn't run so much as stomp, straight to her window. She rolled it down a few inches, rain dripping onto her arm. "You gotta move," he barked. "We've got a schedule." Martha opened her mouth, but the man was already yanking the door open. His hand landed on the wheel, shoved hers aside with a rough twist. Before she could brace herself, the truck tilted, slid, and with a guttural choke, the engine died. They didn't look back. The convoy roared past, churning the road into something unrecognizable. The last SUV sent a wave of muddy water up her side panel as it passed, soaking her jeans through the open door. She sat there for a moment, one hand still on the keys, one foot in the mud. Not a word, not a sound. Only the faint clicking of the engine cooling and the taste of metal in the back of her throat. She reached up, wiped a streak of dirt from her cheek with the edge of her sleeve, and closed the door. Tried the key once, nothing. The engine gave a lazy cough and went quiet again. Fine. Martha stepped down into the mud, knee-deep in silence. She didn't scream. She didn't chase. But the part of her that still remembered every acre of her father's land, every storm that had flattened their corn, and every calf she'd delivered in the dead of night, that part stirred. They wouldn't remember her face, but she'd remember theirs. The mud stretched across the road like a trap laid by the land itself, patient, silent, and final. The convoy didn't stand a chance. One after another, the black SUVs sank to their axles, engines whining in protest. Tires spun, spraying thick ropes of sludge onto nearby cattails and each other's windshields. The road, if it could still be called that, had turned into a soup of clay, water, and the pride of men who thought four-wheel drive meant invincibility. A man in a fitted coat paced in tight circles beside the lead vehicle, phone glued to his ear, barking short, clipped commands that went nowhere. Reception was spotty out here. Every few steps, he'd slap the phone against his palm as if that might summon a signal. His hair was perfect. His shoes less so, buried in muck halfway to the laces. Behind him, 2 of his men were hunched over a rope, trying to wedge boards under a tire that just spat them back like splinters. They moved fast, but nothing moved. The trucks groaned deeper into the mud like they were being swallowed whole. Then came the soft rumble of another engine. Martha's truck crept down the hill, tires gripping with the patience of someone who didn't fight the road, someone who knew it. She pulled to a stop just past the worst of the bog, high and dry on a ridge of gravel the others had flown past in their rush. The rain had eased into a mist, and her windshield steamed as she cut the engine. She didn't get out right away, just sat, watching. The man noticed her before anyone else. He turned, jaw set, hand still holding the dead phone. "You," he called out, already stepping toward her door. "You have a winch? Chain? Anything?" Martha stepped out slowly, her boots hitting the wet earth with a muted squelch. She said nothing. Her eyes moved from the helpless convoy to the useless pile of gear the men had abandoned near the ditch. "We're stuck," he said, as if that wasn't obvious. "I'll pay. Just pull us out." She studied him for a long second. His voice was smoother now. Civil, but still sharp around the edges, the kind of tone people use when they're trying not to sound desperate. Martha folded her arms. The damp breeze tugged at the collar of her jacket. "I don't want your money," she said finally, voice even. "I want a promise." He blinked. "A what?" "You heard me," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You'll do something for me." "Not now. Later. I'll ask when I'm ready." The man frowned, not used to this kind of transaction. His fingers twitched near his coat pocket, maybe out of habit, maybe reaching for a checkbook that hadn't mattered in years. Around him, the rest of the crew had gone quiet, eyes bouncing from Martha to their boss like spectators waiting for a verdict. He exhaled through his nose. Brief. Annoyed. "Fine," he muttered. "Whatever it is, I'll do it." Martha nodded once. "Say it." He hesitated. "I promise." Only then did she walk back to her truck, fingers brushing over the hood like she was waking an old friend. The men stepped aside, suddenly unsure of their footing. The big tires rolled forward, slow and steady, and the sound of the engine filled the air like something trustworthy. She didn't look back. Not yet. One of the suited men climbed into Martha's truck like it might bite him. He hesitated at the seat, stared down at the worn gearshift and the rusted levers like they were written in another language. A few buttons were pressed. The key turned. Nothing. The engine coughed once, weak and insulted, then fell silent. Another man tried. He pumped the clutch, tugged the wrong lever, muttered something under his breath. The truck groaned but didn't move an inch. Behind him, the boss paced in the rain, arms crossed, jaw twitching. Martha leaned against the front fender, arms folded, calm as a windless field. "You boys done?" she asked, more to the sky than to them. The man in charge, Preston, someone had called him, stepped forward, frowning. "Fine," she said, tilting her chin toward the cab. "Let's see you try." Preston hesitated. His gaze slid to the others. One of them smirked. Another coughed into his fist. There was no backing out now. He rolled up his sleeves, which did nothing. His shoes were already ruined, and the knees of his trousers bore a splatter of brown shame. Climbing into the cab, he sat stiffly, like the truck might reject him on principle. He looked at the dashboard, then at the levers, then at Martha. "Well?" he asked. She didn't move, just stood there, rain dripping from her hat brim, not offering a single word of guidance. The key turned. The engine sputtered, then died. He tried again. This time the truck jerked forward an inch, then stopped. A loud clang echoed through the chassis. A third attempt brought nothing but a sputtering grind. "Easy," Martha said, finally. "It's not a racehorse. You gotta coax it." But he wasn't listening. His face was red now, sweat clinging to his temples despite the cold. When he finally climbed down, he didn't meet her eyes. She stepped past him, brushed off the seat with a flat hand, and climbed in like it was second nature. The engine caught on the first turn. The old truck purred, not pretty, but proud. Martha reversed slowly, uncoiling the tow chain. Men scrambled to hook it onto the lead SUV. She watched through the side mirror, waited for a thumbs up, then eased forward, gently rocking the truck to find grip. The tires bit into firmer ground. The tension in the chain stretched like a breath held too long, then released. With a slurp and groan, the first vehicle lurched free. The second took less time. When it was over, the convoy stood in the mist like schoolboys after a scolding. Quiet. Watching her. Waiting. She stepped out, unhooked the chain, and met Preston's eyes. "You gave your word," she said. "I did. I'll call on it. Just not yet." Then she turned, climbed back into her truck, and pulled away without looking back. The gravel crunched under her tires like a slow, deliberate promise. The The black SUVs were already there when Martha turned onto the long gravel path that led to the farmhouse. They sat heavy and still in the driveway like vultures waiting out a storm. Their paint jobs gleamed under the gray sky. Clean again. Someone had hosed off the mud, but not the memory. The front door of the house was open. Raised voices leaked into the yard. She parked by the barn and stepped out slowly, boots crunching against the gravel. One hand on the door frame, she paused a second before stepping inside. Her son Jake stood in the living room, squared off against two men in fitted suits. His face was red, his voice shaking with fury. A third man, shorter, older, holding a briefcase, sat at the kitchen table flipping through paperwork like it meant nothing. Martha's daughter-in-law lingered in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes wide. "I told you," Jake snapped. "This land's been in our family for 4 generations. You can't just." "We're not here to discuss history," one of the suits cut in. "We're here because legal ownership has changed. Your cousins sold their shares. Your uncle, too. The parcels you didn't protect, they're already ours." "They were tricked," Jake said. "Paid off or pressured." The man shrugged. "The contracts are solid. And the rest will be settled in court." Martha stepped forward then. The room went still. She didn't speak right away. Just looked at the man at the center of it all, the same one who'd paced through the mud hours earlier, barking orders, pretending his world could never get stuck. Preston Whitman. His name sat in her mind now like a stone. "You came all the way out here," she said quietly, "to forget what you promised." Preston turned to face her, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. "Mrs. Gray, I assure you this isn't personal. It's business. Your family's welcome to make a generous profit. There's a development planned. The offer still stands." She didn't move. Her voice didn't rise. "You gave me your word. On that road, in front of your men." He blinked, a flicker of discomfort passing over his face. "That was a courtesy," he said, trying for casual. Figure of speech. But something shifted in the room. One of his assistants, the tall one with the scar along his jawline, cleared his throat. "She's right," he said. "You said it. We all heard you." Another man, younger, nodded slowly. "You gave your word, sir." For a moment, no one breathed. Preston's jaw tightened. His eyes swept the room, at his staff, the family, the open door behind him. There was no way out that didn't leave something behind. His voice, when it came, was quieter. Not defeated, but checked. "We'll revisit the terms," he said. "Discuss options." But even as he said it, it was clear something had cracked. Not the land. Not the law. His control. His image. And Martha stood in the center of it, steady as a fence post after a storm. They sat at the old kitchen table the next morning, not as enemies, not quite as partners. The air smelled of percolated coffee and damp wood, the kind of scent that settled deep into the grain of the floorboards after years of harvest and hardship. Preston Whitman didn't touch the mug Jake had poured for him. It steamed quietly between them, ignored. Martha leaned back, arms crossed loosely over her chest. Her boots left faint marks on the tile where the rain had followed her in. She wasn't dressed up for a meeting. She never was. Flannel shirt, hair pulled back, eyes sharp. The kind of look that didn't ask for respect, just expected it. "I'm not looking for revenge," she said. "I don't need your apologies, and I don't want to fight. But I'm not leaving either." Preston's eyes flicked to the window. Outside, the morning sun finally cut through the mist, revealing rows of apple trees stretching east, not many, but healthy. Bees drifted around the edge of the porch. Somewhere in the barn, a tractor rumbled to life. "You're sitting on good soil," he said at last. "We did our research." "I know what I'm sitting on," Martha replied. "And I know what it produces. Best clover honey in 3 counties. Heirloom apples that still taste like something. No sprays, no shortcuts." He hesitated. This wasn't how these meetings usually went. "You're saying you want to sell to me?" "I'm saying you're building restaurants that claim to care about quality," she said. "You want a story behind your menu?" Start it here. Partner with us. Use what this land gives. And in return, you leave the rest of it alone. He studied her. There was no bluff in her eyes. No desperation either. Just a woman who knew the weight of her offer. It's risky, he said. It's smart, she answered. A long pause followed, not uncomfortable, just heavy with the shift in tide. He leaned back, tapped a finger against the table. I'll need contracts. Volume guarantees. Logistics. You'll get them, Jake said from the corner. We can scale up. There's room to grow. Preston nodded slowly. The gears were already turning: supply chains, branding angles, costs per crate. The man knew how to calculate. He reached for the coffee, finally, and took a sip. It's not bad, he said. Martha raised an eyebrow. That's the well water. Clean. Unbought. Preston smiled, a small, reluctant curve of the mouth. But it was real. Outside, the barn door swung open, and a flock of chickens scattered across the yard, raising soft clucks as the morning fully arrived. Business had begun. On new terms. 6. By autumn, the trucks came every Tuesday. White panel vans with Whitman Foods painted neatly on the sides rolled up the gravel drive just after dawn, their tires crunching over the same road where everything had started. Young drivers in clean polos and dusty boots climbed out, checked the crates, loaded up boxes of apples, jars of honey, eggs packed in straw-lined cartons. They didn't linger. They knew to be quick, to be polite. Word had spread. The land hadn't changed, not really. The fence line still sagged near the east pasture. The porch still creaked. The old barn still leaned a bit to one side like it was listening. But there was new tin on the shed roof. A second-hand tractor behind the barn with paint still fresh. And Martha had let Jake install a walk-in cooler beside the chicken coop. Business needed structure, he'd said. Martha didn't argue. She just nodded and handed him the ledger. At the diner in town, folks still talked about what had happened that spring. The story came in pieces about the convoy in the mud, about the deal made without papers, about the woman who didn't raise her voice, but didn't step back either. Every telling added something, the way it always did in small towns, but the bones stayed true. Preston Whitman never came back in person, but his name was on every check. Martha never brought up the road again. She didn't need to. The land spoke for her. And the silence that came with a promise kept, that spoke louder than anything else. Some evenings, she sat out on the porch with her coffee, boots up on the railing, watching the sun drop behind the orchard. The sky always turned gold just before it let go. She didn't smile much. But when she did, it was the kind of smile that said, I was here before you, and I'll be here after. Not because I fought. Because I endured. Some people claim power. Some hold it like rope. But Martha Gray? She planted hers. And it took root.